Jim,
Oh, what? Oh, because if you wore a Red Sox jersey, anybody would say anything.
that's right.
No, whatever.
I'm sure 2 votes will be nay.
Recording in
Susan, you've won
progress.
4
Evening
World
and
Series in the
welcome.
last 20 years. Be quiet. Come on.
Good evening and welcome to the April 2nd, 2025 Yarmouth Planning Board meeting. I am Joan Crowley, Chair. This is to formally advise that as required by Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 30A, paragraphs 18 to 25, and pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, and an act relative to extending certain state of emergency accommodations, signed into law on June 16th, 2021. The Yarmouth Planning Board will hold a public meeting on April 2nd, 2025 at 5:30 p.m. The public is welcome to attend in person this evening or via alternative public access provided on the notice of meeting available on the Town of Yarmouth website. I'd like to begin by taking roll call. Susan Britta.
Here.
Deirdre Gaquin. Here. Will Rubenstein.
Here.
Jim Saban.
Yes.
Peter
Here.
Slovak.
Here.
Ken Smith.
Here.
Joanne Crowley, Chair. Seeing that we have a quorum present, I'll now call the meeting to order. Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance.
And to the republic for which it stands,
One nation,
under God,
indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. On our agenda tonight, we have just a couple of items. The first is the local comprehensive plan. Our town planner, Kathy Williams, will review with us a staff meeting that she had with the Cape Cod Commission, provide an update on the community planning grant, and review the draft LCP that we all received in our packets. So Kathy, I'm going to turn it over to you to give us an update on a couple of things, and then we'll jump right back to the local comprehensive plan update.
Sure. I just want to point out that Jeff Bagg from BSC Group is also on, kind of listening to get your guys' feedback on some of the stuff with regard to the LCP.
Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me virtually.
Jeff and I met with Chloe and Martha from the Cape Cod Commission and kind of gave them an update of kind of where we were in the process. And then also, I think we got a favorable review from them with regard to what we had been doing. There were some areas that they kind of had mentioned as maybe taking note of the capital improvement plan. That chapter can be a little bit tricky, and different communities have done it different ways. I think we're in very good standing with our capital improvement program, which goes out 10 years, that we should be able to write that plan to a satisfactory to the commission. There's also a discussion on the targeted action plan, which was a little confusing to me, and I think we might have to get some more clarity once we provide them with the draft. But they wanted to talk about whether there was a difference between the action plan and then the matrix. The action plan, I think, is kind of the things that you have seen here, but they did want to have those extra couple extra little things beyond just, like, not just continue with our municipal wastewater program, but what are some of the actual actions that you would need to take in order to continue with that, which I think we have in here. And then the actual matrix is something that once we get the action items down, Jeff and his crew can kind of put together, and then we start identifying responsible parties, we start looking at the timeframes with which we think we're going to get them done, and then also the kind of the priorities of everything. I think the vast majority of the things that are in here as action items I would consider to be relatively high priority, or they wouldn't necessarily be in here. So we also talked about providing them with the draft, which we hope to have a first draft in May, and maybe even providing them with some smaller chunks, maybe different sections for them to review, because it might take them a couple weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, for them to have it reviewed by all of their various people in their department. But it really did seem like, so far, I think we're on track for certification with the Cape Cod Commission subsequent to, hopefully, an approval at the fall special town meeting on our local comprehensive plan. So that was a relatively positive meeting. We're kind of on track, gave us a few heads up on things we needed to pay a little extra attention to, which we're doing, and we're kind of moving forward. One of the other
Kathy,
things...
on that, just a quick one, in terms of timing, we're scheduled to meet with the board
yes, we were...
May
May 6th.
6th, so it would be sometime after that we would submit to the commission.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, right now, we are kind of like need to give periodic updates to the select board, and right now, thank you for Joanne for bringing it up at the last meeting. The next time we would be available would be the May 6th meeting with the select board. I think that's just something that Joanne and I would give just an update of where we stand. We've got a lot of great work done. We've got a lot of great information from our community meetings, and kind of let BSC concentrate on modifying the existing conditions and moving forward with developing that draft. One other component of the community planning grant that we had, I don't know whether anyone's familiar with that. We received a $100,000 community planning grant. We were asked, BSC Group, and they have provided us with a scope to help us out with one of the steps with regard to that. It has to basically do with mixed-use developments along Route 28. What can we do to make them look exactly the way we want them, as well as what can we do, what are some of the pitfalls, whether it's zoning or financing, and then also kind of what can we do to incentivize that. So they're going to be doing some benchmarking of some successful mixed-use projects in the Commonwealth that we can take a look at. And then they're also going to be doing a good regulatory review of our zoning bylaw to take a look at that. And then, of course, we'll have a community meeting, obviously presenting information to you guys, and then a summary of the report. This all needs to be done by the end of the fiscal year, so June 30th, so that's going to be something that they're going to be working concurrently with all the great work that they're doing for us already on the LCP. We also have an RFQ, request for quotes, out there for the next step of this planning grant, which is essentially to take all this great benchmarking and zoning analysis that BSC's group's going to do, and then actually develop some renderings of different size projects. What would like a generic mixed-use project might look like on a small lot, on a medium lot, and on a large lot, so that we can start letting people get a better idea of what this might look like. We did a lot of that in the VCOD when we were trying to get that approved, but that's been over 10 years. People forget, so it's another way of kind of bringing it to people's attention. We're also going to see about organizing and facilitating a panel discussion with business leaders and different mixed-use developers. Bill Scott, the Assistant Town Administrator, knows of several people that could be part of this group, really to kind of find out how were you able to do these mixed-use projects successfully? What were some of the things that you needed to overcome, and how can we help incentivize that type of thing? I think we all know that we have a housing problem. We need to put housing somewhere. People are a little resistant to put it in our residential neighborhoods. We don't want to lose our commercial corridor, so mixed use is the magic answer. So how do we promote that and get people to be doing that? So those are a couple things that are going on in addition to the initial LCP work that BSC Group was working on.
Kathy, remind me, the community planning grant is a state or federal grant?
It's a state grant through Housing and Livable Communities.
Okay. And who is overseeing that grant? Do you?
Yes, we also have hired an interim economic development coordinator, Jay Grandy, who works part-time, and he's been helping us move some of these things forward. So he's been helping kind of in the background, and he's helping with the grant. The administration, there's a whole bunch of administrative things that are associated with the grant, and hopefully he'll be continuing with that. But once we get, obviously working with BSC Group, it would be me, and then the other RFQ, when we get quotes back from they're mainly architectural firms that we sent it out to, I would then be working with them as well.
I'm not sure if I'm having a brain freeze. I don't think I am, but how is this related, maybe, Peter, to what CEDC was doing in trying to allocate some funding for
It's
just
different.
this? It is different.
It's different. That's the market analysis, and I think that's something where we need to come back before CEDC to talk about that a little bit. They give some funds. I think we might need a little bit more money because some more money was spent in one area. I think the diff then was going to go to the marketing study. But that's really to check our demographics, check our area. What are the different types of uses that we need here, and how can we and if they're what we want, how do we try and market it and attract people to come here?
But again, associated with the Route 28 corridor, if I recall.
Yeah, mainly the Route 28 corridor, mainly our commercial corridors.
But has there been
We haven't seen anything, if that's what CDC hasn't seen anything of that yet.
Okay.
So we gave, I think, $75,000.
5,000, that's what I'm remembering.
It was 75 grand, Peter.
Still 75, and part of it was used for some of the things Bill Scott needed to do and take care of, and part of it's still there.
I
but
think
it's-
the diff, there was some grant writing that was involved, and then there was the market study.
Okay. So, again, I apologize for so many questions on the community planning grant. We've had this, we applied for this last year?
Yes.
Okay. And it recently awarded, and then we had an RFP process
Yeah, we're behind on the grant. I think originally, we were hoping that we would have an economic development coordinator
Yeah,
position
yeah,
filled.
yeah.
We've been trying for, I think, 2 years now.
Kyle left.
Since Kyle left to try and fill that position. We just haven't found a really good candidate. We were lucky to find Jay as a kind of an interim person to help us along, but we're behind on that. That's why there was a big push in separating out some of the work to get BSC Group to do it before the end of the fiscal year. The RFQ also has some work being pushed very heavily for the end of the fiscal year.
Kathy, the grant ends in June, is that what you're saying?
June 30th,
Okay.
But this sounds like it could be it could play a really important role here in the LCP.
The whole intent was to have these studies happening concurrently, including the market study concurrently with what we were doing with the LCP, so they could then be incorporated in. We'll have to see where we are with those, and obviously the action items, there is some action items under the economy section related to these already. So we'll just, wherever we are, we'll have to then say the action item is to continue with this and identify what that is. So we're not going to have all the answers, like we were kind of hoping to have all the answers from these studies to incorporate, and we're not going to quite be there.
That's all.
Do you want to move
Yeah,
on?
sure,
Okay.
absolutely, please.
There's a lot of information in here, and I think it's indicative of all of the great information that has been collected through all the different community meetings, the open house that we had, the community meeting that we had in January, all of the different interviews that we have done and staff has done with a wide variety of committees and groups, basically to identify kind of moving forward with the action items. A lot of the action items in here, and you might think, where's that action item? And you thought it might be here, well, maybe it's over here. So you really have to go through the whole thing and identify that all the different action items. I tried to put them in the right spot. Maybe we need to move them around, but I was trying to put them in the most applicable location. All of the natural systems, with the exception of the coastal resiliency, that's essentially coming out of the open space and recreation plan. The only things that kind of got added was talking about the Route 6 Bass River Bridge, which I believe Joanne had mentioned previously is something that we wanted to bring up. And also, one of the interviews with the Hyannis Park Civic Association was that Hyannis PFAS Community Working Group and what they're trying to do with concerns with the PFAS from the fire training facility and then the airport. So that's something that got added in there. And then also maybe taking another look at stormwater regulations in general. Right now, our stormwater regulations just really apply to 1 acre or more. Maybe we want to have something in our general zoning bylaw with regard to that. I wasn't planning on going line by line because I didn't want you all to glaze over while doing this. I think Joanne and I had discussed it a little bit today, and she had kind of gone over some of the highlights of some of the things that she wanted. I was kind of hoping maybe to get the input from all of the planning board members on your initial thoughts on these things. You'll notice that there's some highlighted areas in here, which are not just necessarily questions for you, but questions for town staff. I did send this out to town staff a week and a half ago, hopefully, because I want to make sure that these are action items that's appropriate for them. They're working on it this particular way, or maybe they're also doing some additional things and they would want us to add that in as an action item. A lot of times, thinking in action items are putting them in the LCP might ultimately help us with a future grant. So you may see some things in here, and we put a bunch of stuff that's in the kitchen sink in the open space and rec plan, kind of because we wanted to make sure that we could highlight that in a grant application. For example, we got the park grant for the Riverwalk Park, and then we were able to say goal number blank in the open space and rec plan. It was specifically referenced. So
What Kathy and I talked about this afternoon, so for tonight's discussion, since this is, I think, truly a work in progress, I mean, this is the first kind of time we've seen what it's going to look like. I mean, I think we all agreed the last time on the kind of the format of this. We did make some suggestions as to moving some things around, and I think this draft incorporates that. But I think the most efficient way to do this, because if we go through it line by line, we'll be here till tomorrow. And I don't know that it would necessarily serve a really good purpose. So what I thought, and Kathy and I thought might be a good idea, is each of us go through some major comments about where you are with it now, or specific, if there are things that have been left out, or general organization of how it looks. Kathy intends to send out a Word document where we can actually physically make the changes if we so want, which I think would be very helpful. And we get that back to Kathy. And then she'll have all of our comments in a format that she can bundle together and sort through. So what I thought I'd do is I would start and just give you an example of how I looked at this. As some of you may know, I have a tendency to want to diagram every sentence, and I tried not to do that. It's being a product of Catholic schools. So my one kind of overarching suggestion is that the key issues in each one need to be in the same format. They need to be either a statement or an objective description of the issue, and not trend into being a solution or trend into being an action item. I mean, I'll use it as an example. To me, as the first one under natural systems, maintaining and improving drinking water quality, well, that feels like an action. That's not a definition of the issue. So in each one of them, I mean, I got stuck on page 1 and then I said, stop. You have to read the whole thing. And so I did. So I think that's where I am on that. I'd be curious if everybody feels kind of, Ken, Mr. Smith?
Madam Chair and Kathy, that's actually very much how I feel about it. And I mean, I think there's a lot of information here that truly haven't completely digested. But the question, I guess, that I had, this being kind of the first, I guess, real draft of the information all being put together, I was looking at more from the back end, because I think the statements of the issues are really very accurate of what we're seeing as issues here in Yarmouth. But are the action items supposed to be kind of, this is the direction that we want to see the town go? And if they are, some are like unbelievably broad, that I said it's so broad that it's very candid, almost pointless. You know, I mean, I circled a few as I was going through it today at work, and then right now, you know, continuing to support the work of the Community Housing Committee and Affordable Housing Trust to reach the 10% goal. That's just one item. And, I mean, that's down on an action item as far as key goals on housing. And that's a great statement. We all want to see that happen. But how do we get there? And that's where I was kind of going from the action standpoint, and maybe I'm going about it all wrong. I guess that's what I'm looking for, some clarity here. Are the action items supposed to be the solution, how we get to some of these problems? Because, you know, like the one, for example, there's one earlier about traffic and congestion and speed of roadways, but that's all it says. So that's a great goal to have, to reduce congestion on Route 28 or on any road in Yarmouth. But how do you get there? Because every road is a different problem. So I guess I just was looking is, what are the action items supposed to be? And maybe we can turn to Jeff to help us with that right now, of what that, because to me, I look at the action and that's telling me, okay, this is the action to solve or get to a repair to some of these issues.
It may be on that, if I may, Kat, but I'm going to let you answer. But I think an LCP is meant to be broad. Mm-hmm. It's not meant to be, you know, identifying every element of an action plan that would contribute to the accomplishment of the goals or addressing the issues. And some of them are too broad. I would agree with you. But others could be, the language could be revised to say something like, identify those roadways where there are speeding issues, rather than just a general broad. But that's where the refinement comes in. And those kind of comments are exactly what we want.
Because where I'm going, Madam Chair, I don't disagree with you, but when you use the term LCP, local consultative plan, correct? To me, it's an LCS when it makes a broad statement. It's not really, to me, it's a plan to nothing, you know, so.
I have a question, Madam Chair, after
Sure.
Susan. Susan will go first.
But I just
It's
like.
about this issue.
Okay, but I just want Kathy to give us a bit, you know, the LCP does have its own definitions, so to speak. But go ahead,
But
Ken.
it has components as well, sorry, that are way more specific. For instance, and this is why I wanted to jump in, I apologize. For instance, the open space and rec plan is literally, these are the things that we need to do.
Which is-
Whereas,
Yeah.
and that lives there, but it doesn't, and Ken, you're not wrong about saying that, the majority of people are probably not gonna, may choose not to dive into each of the specific plans, for instance, the housing production plan, which I imagine is way more specific than the housing goals that we saw here. OSRP, same thing. So part of the challenge is how do you get people, to go deeper, but then not overwhelm them at the top level when you're pointing out that the components of this LCP are actually not just this top level, it's all the foundation underneath in terms of the actual action. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get people there unless we actually literally drive them there once they come to the top of the pyramid if they want to get deeper. Does that make any sense?
Yeah,
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought it was relevant.
I think some of the things, I kind of wanted to give credit for all of the committees that we have,
Yeah.
because they're very laborious for staff to do. And a lot of the, like, other LCPs might say, put together Affordable Housing Trust. We already have one. We already have a community housing committee. We already have an energy committee that's doing a lot of great work. We already have a great recycling and solid waste committee. A lot of other plans might just say form those types of groups, but we have them. So I kind of was thinking maybe we needed to give them a little bit of a shout out that maybe it's not continue to support, maybe it's something worded a little bit differently. But that's why things like that are in there. But I'm more inclined to be more specific, like with the fourth one there, complete the study being conducted by the University of Massachusetts, Amherst, Donahue. So I'm fine taking some of these things out. I know that Jeff was saying that maybe we don't need to say that we need to update the open space and rec plan every 7 years or the housing production plan every 5 years. Maybe those aren't things that we need to incorporate in here. So there's certainly things that can be narrowed down, but I think there's a lot of actual specificity with regard to this. So if we want, and actually more specificity than some of the other plans that I've actually looked at.
And,
So, we may want to take some stuff out.
yeah, that's, Kathy, that's where I was going. Less is more to me. I think if we had some of the stuff in here, I believe it could come out. And I think it's a great idea if you send it around in a Word form, rather than us trying to dissect it here at the table, is let us take a stab at it and send it back. Maybe we're wrong. I mean, what I don't want to be misunderstood, there is some tremendous work in here. And there's been some tremendous work by the people that have come to this room to give us this information. But I've always believed less is more. And I think that if we just narrow this down to the stuff that we need in here, that's where it should go.
And I agree with what Joanne said with regard to the key issues. We're just trying to get them down, and I wasn't sure exactly how to phrase them, but we do want them to be clearly identifying the issues and not starting to move into the answers. So I think there's certainly phraseology and wordsmithing that definitely needs to happen, and elimination. This is a little bit like the existing conditions plan where it has a lot of everything in it, and quite frankly, I do agree that things could come out.
Yeah, that's good, that's good. That's generally my comments. I had some specific ones with Kathy. I'll use as an example what she mentioned before. I'm looking at the action items and I'm saying, hey, where is the dredging of Dennis, that Dennis is going to do at Kelly Bay? And then sure enough, you get to page 14, and there it is. It's just in a different category. I was looking. And Kathy, and when she and I spoke, she had to kind of put them in one place or another rather than repeat them. And I had questions on culverts. What else? Oh, I did have some questions with overlap, Kathy. There seem to be some areas where there is an overlap. I can give you the specifics when you send it out, but I just saw that there were action items that kind of appeared that seemed to be the same that appeared in two different places.
Okay. I know that I had a little difficulty with regard to the fire station feasibility study, because it seems like it was somewhat related to coastal resiliency, but it was also somewhat related to town services. So. But definitely, anything you see like that, let me know. Or, again, if things are missing, a study or something that you know that's going on that you think it would be a great action item to continue with, then let us know that as too.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could I have a discussion with regards to Built Systems Action Item Number 1?
Can you tell us what page, please, Jim?
That would be page 8 of 21. So 1 says revise the architectural and site design standards and consider making them mandatory for new development, raise and replace, and for substantial redevelopment. I guess my issue with that is, later on, we talk about promoting development, and when we're putting mandatory things on, it makes it more restrictive and harder to promote economic redevelopment if we're saying, hey, we want you to build in our town, but you got to go through this committee too. We've added a new one now, so you're going to go through this site design review. So
This is Design Review Committee.
the revised architectural and site design.
Design Review Committee does the review for the architectural and site design standards. Right now, they're very confusing, and I would like to simplify them, but make it clear that when you are raising and replacing an entire property, and you can then decide where you're going to put your parking, that you do it in a nice way. so
Then
that we
using the
get-
word simplify as opposed to revise might then connect to the idea of the economic redevelopment as opposed to just saying revise, right, Jim? What if it said
No, I'm looking
simplify?
at, my,
You want the mandatory
Site
part.
I'm looking at the word making them mandatory.
Okay, I was also focusing on the front end, saying simplify.
Mandatory, right now, a lot of times when people go to Design Review Committee, if it's a commercial development south of Route 6, it's advisory. You can follow it or you don't have to follow it. Most people, if they have to get some type of special permit through the Zoning Board of Appeals, are very accommodating, and there's also some developers who are like, oh yeah, that's a great idea, I see what you're talking about, let's go ahead and move forward and do that. But if it's advisory, then you have no design standards. A lot of other communities have whole site plan review, special permits through the planning board. Harwich has them. I don't think that's anything that we want to be doing. I think that there's some very simple, basic, good design standards that are not rocket science that everyone should be adhering to.
As the planning board's representative to design review, I don't disagree. I think it's important that we try to create a sense of similarity, if you will, and cohesiveness amongst the architectural design and standards. I think you all know I travel quite a bit, and sometimes I go to places and try to figure out what the heck they were doing. And then there are areas that it just makes sense where
Texas.
all the buildings are kind of, Houston, Texas is a perfect example.
No, there's no zoning.
And it's a mess. And I'm not suggesting that we eliminate it, but I'm just trying to wrap my head around how we consider doing that without making it mandatory. And maybe it's mandatory to go there, but not mandatory to listen to them, is right now what's going on. I mean, we have our meetings, and we have one gentleman who's been in front of us 3 times, 4, and, changing. It doesn't cost them anything to go. It costs the members of the board and Kathy's time, but it doesn't cost an individual a fee to go in front of design review.
The architectural and site design standards are mandatory for the road, or should the maximum extent possible, for hotel motel overlay district and for the VCOD.
Right.
So there are places where it is mandatory. It's just, sometimes people are literally raising and replacing, and it's advisory. And so maybe it's just if you're raising and replacing, or you have a whole new development, don't we want Route 28 to look a certain way?
Yes, that's the whole point of,
So that's what this is trying to get at.
Or Station
is-
Ave, for that matter.
yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing is maybe what things look like on White's Path is much simpler than what we want things to look like on Route 28. So right now, the standards apply to every business district, and it may not.
But again, so Joe Smo can come in and, because he's mandatorily required to come to design review, doesn't have to put that third window on the second floor.
if you're making its compliance to the standards, and if you have simple, reasonable standards, maybe they put in that window. Maybe you have to have a front door entrance to Route 28. Those are all basic design standards that make Yarmouth look better.
Yes.
If you don't have those, and it's all just, if
Have
you feel
28
like
You have
it,
28 the way it looks today.
I'm concerned, I mean, we keep saying, what's our vision for Route 28 now that sewering is coming? I think this is going to help us get there, and I think the mixed-use study will help us get to what are these things that we would want to be looking at as well. I don't want to do anything that's going to impede people coming to the town of
Not
Yarmouth.
onerous. I mean, even, they're really not onerous standards. They're basic development standards. No one should object to that, right? They're not going to be
Nobody wants a big,
onerous.
giant rectangular box.
Right, exactly.
So we want it to look a certain way. That doesn't mean it has to be gold-plated, but there are very simple ways of doing it. I think Yarmouth Commons looks very nice. That actually looks super nice. And a lot of that is details that they put in with the trim work.
Right.
But that wasn't required by the zoning, but the modulations in the building, the roof line, and that type of thing, that was required, because it was a HMOD1 project. So think about it.
I mean, I think the language there, though, is consider making the, we can't make a mandatory. There'd have to be a whole process of,
Go through the zoning bylaw, you should just say that.
so leaving it somewhat open, or maybe if it's softer language you want, but we want to review.
Applicable?
Yeah, don't we, Jim?
Oh, I agree. I
We
just,
wanna review.
I just, when I read it, it's like, comes across that, as somebody who's coming to town, reading that, well, really, you got me to have to do this too? So maybe it's the word mandatory, and maybe we can say that we should promote use of architectural design. I'm not sure yet. Let me think about
Yeah,
the wording.
yeah,
But
good.
maybe just the word mandatory comes down as like, I mean, we all heard it a million times that the town is not business friendly. I think I've heard that since I was 10. So when I see words like mandatory, it says,
Maybe you just consider making them applicable to,
yeah. Well, we can all think of,
applicable to a lot of things right now. They're just not applicable to everything.
yeah. So anyway, that's just my
Okay, yeah, no.
2 cents on the issue.
Good one. Anyone else? I've finished up with my general comments, and Kathy and I did chat before.
If I can
But-
just add, Madam Chair, that I think the growth policy changes work perfect. I think, I don't see any need to change page 1. Anybody, I mean, it read quite well to me. I thought it was good.
I did have a question on that, Kathy. Long Pond intersection,
Yeah.
which one?
Which one is that?
Oh, with Route 28.
And 28?
Yeah. These are all, yeah.
And I had a question, if it includes this area here, because I think that's pretty much a major area. Is this part of the area near the Bass River and the Long Pond intersection, or what? I don't know how you define the,
I kind of think it's in between.
yeah.
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 So, I mean, do you want to say the entire?
Entire
I mean,
stretch or
I
whatever.
mean,
Route 28 from the Bass River Bridge to the Hyannis border.
But this seems,
Simplify it.
Keep it simple, right?
No, but it does say the Route 28 corridor, and then this just highlights certain areas.
Such as, yeah.
from the community meetings.
Yes.
We were asking pointed
Yes.
questions in the land use section of where do you want to see things going? And these were kind of, I think, the highlight.
Right, but I think the overall sentiment was, as Jim said, all of 28.
All of
From
28,
Bass
right.
River Bridge down to the East Main Street.
Anything else, Jim?
No, I'm good. I'll shut up now for the minute.
Who's next?
Is the document supposed to quantify any of these points? Because I always find, we can go back to the last LCP, and when we look at this 10 years from now, how are we going to know if we were successful? And I don't know if this is, you read the key issues: more housing types, more commercial, simplify, limit, better, need to preserve. I mean, if it doesn't, is it supposed to, in the housing section, to attain the 10% goal? We're at like 3%, right? 4%? 5%. It's taken a long time to get to 5%. I mean, just we're going to be chasing 10% for maybe forever, right?
Other ADUs are that way, yep.
Right. But I just don't know if there's any way to quantify any of this so that we can look back
You're
and
looking for
say.
measures of success.
Measures of success.
There is a section in the LCP, the template that says, say, you can add those type of things. How would you benchmark whether you're successful or not? I don't want it to get into the case of it being, the specificity being really rigid, you know, you've developed 32, but, you know, that type of quantitative. But I think there might be some ways of identifying whether we've been successful. I don't know if Jeff Bagg has anything that he might want to offer on that, but they do allow for us to have ways of measuring the success.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
you know, I see exactly where Peter's coming from. You know, one of the problems that when we do these, we don't assign responsibility. Action item A, B, C. Who's responsible for doing that? So what happens, what's going to happen with this, sad to say, is what happens with other LCPs. It got put on a shelf and nobody went back and looked at it and said, you know, we were trying to achieve this. Who was supposed to do that? Or who's going to do that? So until we can assign, and we can't, but until maybe a board of selectmen and town administrators take the end product and go through it and say, well, if this is an action item, who's responsible for the action item and how are we going to get it done? Then we've written this entire thing and stuck it on a shelf because nobody's going to do anything unless people are held accountable for the action items.
That's in the matrix where you would assign responsibility. The benefit of
that will
this
be
is
there.
Staff's already working on a lot of this
Oh,
stuff.
absolutely.
So there's already people working on it and have been assigned to them, and it's on their list of things to do. So I don't think that that's an issue. I think it's a question of,
It's just, we don't see it yet. It's not, that's the next step in
Okay.
terms of where this draft is going. You got to agree on kind of the baseline here, and then the assignments, I think, Kathy, if I'm right, will flow from that.
Right, and-
And it may be a committee assignment, it may be a departmental assignment.
It's really the board, the leadership of the town. The Board of Selectmen is going to be responsible for implementing this plan.
That's right.
So, you're right, we all know where certain places are gonna land. But their direction and their attention to it on a routine basis will give us the success benchmarks that Jim's looking for.
I think they're going to turn it back to us.
We'll turn it back to the town.
They're going to turn it back to us.
They'll turn the implementation back to us, but the ultimate success of the plan, they are responsible. They are the leaders of the town.
They don't, and also the community. If they don't fund some of these
Right,
things,
it's
you
not
know,
gonna
it's in
happen.
there.
Exactly.
But that's the documentation. We had tried this, we went to town meeting, it was voted down. We tried this other thing, it got voted down. Or, oh, wait a minute, we tried this and we were successful. Those are all the documentations of what's happening with the LCP. I view this as being something that we would look at annually to try and get an idea of what progress has been made on these different items annually so that we would know.
And there should be one Board of Selectmen meeting dedicated to that.
Yeah.
They
Set their goals, they set their goals each year, so maybe meeting A is review of the comprehensive plan.
And success
And then
benchmarks or
maybe their
whatever.
next meeting, then they could, but I'm not trying to tell the Board of Selectmen how to run their meetings, but
Kathy, how often do they go back to the vision statement that, you know, this committee worked on before I came on, but for a long time? So how often do they go back to that? And-
I don't
and-
go to every select board meeting,
Well, I
so I
mean,
don't know.
it must come, you know, I don't know that it gets referenced very often. I mean.
I think it got referenced in the library study. that
Yeah,
was
the
done very
library study,
nicely.
they went through it, you know, piece by piece, really in a very thorough way. And when I'm involved with CPA and any of those projects that we evaluate, I make sure that the questions are asked, which of the pieces of the vision plan is this addressing? And in fact, I made some recommendation that there should always be that linkage when you submit the application. Read the vision plan and tell us which piece of it you think this project addresses.
Accountability, Jim.
And same for some of the projects for CEDC that are awarded, or any other kind of, the capital plan could be the same. But, I mean, I do try to do that at my committee meetings, and I would encourage everyone, as they continue in theirs, to do the same. It's always in my folder. But getting back to your question about metrics, and because I think quants are good too. Some of the pieces that are in here that will be part of this, or references, like the housing production plan, I think is very quantitative. I don't know, I can't recall if open space and rec.
It is and it isn't. I would say it's very tactical. It's like, this is the issue, and this is what you need to do to start making that issue better, or solving that problem,
Yeah.
whether it's fields or wetlands or open space. But it doesn't necessarily, it's not as quantitative, but it's very, very action-oriented. And literally tied, you can literally follow the through line from issue to action, and then some of the actions are even broken, well, many of them are broken into sub-actions as well.
Yeah.
In a different, so not quantitative, but definitely action-oriented.
Maybe there are some areas, I mean, and, if you see some things that you think maybe we can wrap a metric on, let's do it, and see what we can find. Anyone else?
I had two small things, but
Yeah,
Susan,
please.
did you want
Well, I
to?
was just going to say, it's sort of a reiteration of what was been said earlier about a stronger crosswalk between the issue and the action. And most of it, I think, would fall on a verb. As Peter said, measure this, do this, whatever, inquire, measure.
More.
Insist, whatever the action, but just maybe a stronger crosswalk. And every action doesn't necessarily have to crosswalk with a key issue, but it would be great if it did. And that way, it's easier for the citizens to track, I think. This is what the key issue was, and here's the action item associated with that.
And I'm not trying to toot the horn of the open space and rec, but because we
You were
spent.
chair of.
No, it's not. No, it literally has nothing to do with that. I'm serious. But what I liked about it, because again, I think all of you are seeing that the amount of work that goes into whatever the plan is or whatever the committee's work is that you worry that it is that it's too squishy, and forgetting about if there's anybody who's going to actually hold this plan accountable. The question is, well, what is it that they're actually holding in their hands? Is it going to turn into mush? And the OSRP is literally the opposite of that. And I'm sure in comparison, the housing production plan is also as good. But I guess it's sort of like the ends of the pendulum. It's like the OSRP is like very much, okay, are you concerned about the parks? Okay, well, read page 4, because there's 5 different issues and 3 different ways that we're going to hopefully work on it. That isn't necessarily true in every sub-piece of the LCP, but maybe we can aspire to be more like the OSRP when we can, without, as Ken was saying, without overwhelming people and making them run away. I don't know. It's a balance. It's a dance.
I also
to do all
think
this.
that you may find that there's a lot of people are just going to read the action plan.
Right.
So you have to have enough detail in these things so people know what you're
What you're
talking
talking
about,
right.
but also, not so much that it goes on for 50 pages. So it's a fine line for sure.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Ms. Britta, are you finished?
Yes, I am.
Okay, I just wanted to bring up one, on page 12, action number 2. For the life of me, even though it was only 6 months ago, I cannot remember what we decided at special town meeting about the general bylaw on single plastic use containers. I cannot remember what action the town took.
It got extended, I think they were going to extend it to next
That's right. It's been extended.
It got kicked.
fall, to the
No,
fall.
I believe it's been extended to January 1, 2026, I believe.
Okay, so that's what I just needed, thank you for the reminder, because that's when I read this, I just wanted to sort of like square it with, well, what did we actually just talk about as a town?
We kicked
Yes.
it down the road.
Okay, that's what
No,
I,
that's not fair. It was a petitioned article. So what happens when you get a petitioned
those
article?
are true, Kathy.
Yes,
You did get kicked it, and it was
for a
petitioned.
good reason. You can kick something down the street for a good reason.
It was
We
very
read at
good.
the same
Two things
time.
are true simultaneously, yes.
Trust it helps our businesses. So when a petitioned article goes through, it doesn't get vetted by town staff. It doesn't get the research. It doesn't do all the stuff that we do when we do a
shows up.
zoning. So as good intentioned as it was, and it passed at town meeting, it really wasn't implementable the way it was written. So we said, instead of implementing it here, where we're being told by our businesses that we're going to have all kinds of troubles implementing this because it's too rigid.
Right.
It's all plastics. We got nothing to work with anymore. And now we're going to amend that and come back and amend it at town meeting so that it can be properly implemented in January.
Understood. But a huge part of that discussion, though, had to do with the speed at which our Department of Health was moving in order to actually get the bylaw
Which I felt was a little
enacted.
unfair, because as a petitioned article, there's no town staff that's been assigned to it.
Right.
I see.
It just, okay, here's a petition, I
Sure it
didn't know
is.
anything
I
about it.
see, okay.
I'm already working on 50 things, and then all of a sudden, so poor Jay.
I see.
Tried to jump in and help, and he kind of got,
Yeah, that's where, that
Yeah.
it wasn't so pretty.
yeah.
In
and
some
he was
some of
just
the back
trying
and
to
forth,
help
but I've
and move
forgotten
it
that.
forward and be the person, and then it turned out to be kind of an unfair attack on him.
Well, there was a couple problems with it. Number one, there was many pieces of it that they just, I run a restaurant. I run a community that has a restaurant in it, that we have to-go items that are plastic. And there are a lot of really good stuff that's not plastic and biodegradable, and there's some stuff that right now, there isn't a good alternative. That is what the petitioned article stated, that they want a biodegradable product. And so that was part of it. And then the second part of it is, you write this article, and who's going to be the enforcement arm of it? To really, it's great to have an article that says you can't use plastic and all that stuff, but who's going to enforce it? And I know the Board of Health and all that, but do they have the manpower to go out and say, I'm using the wrong to-go containers for my residents? So that's really what it was, is to try and make it was not kicked down the road. It was advised to push it down a little bit to give us a chance to get everything up to speed and actually work with our vendors and try, okay, what are the alternatives?
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to ask that because I couldn't remember how that got decided. And then I had one more thing. Jim?
Madam Chair, I'd just like to make a public service announcement to those people who are considering petitioning the town of Yarmouth for anything, that they come to Town Hall and speak with the town's staff and work with them so that when it gets to the planning board or something, that the article is perfectly crafted in a way that we have none of these discussions in the future.
And has staff backup, as Kathy was saying.
Well, a perfect example of it was the ADU one, where, the petitioner's article didn't jive with our bylaws and et cetera, but, it happens often, so I'm, to those of you in the public who are considering a petition article, come to Town Hall and work with town staff so that we get it right the first time. That's all.
We just have to be careful, because if 50,000 people could come to town staff and want us to write their petitioned articles for them, and we're not going to do that.
Oh, right.
We
I don't
have
think
20,000 people in town.
I don't think Jim was advocating for that.
No, but there's 5 people who probably, based on that, will probably
We'll
come.
come
I already
50
got an email.
times.
Yeah, they act like 50.
5 people are watching
It's
this
just
meeting?
something to think about. But a lot of times when people bring an issue to us, then the planning board has regularly said, you know what, we agree with you, we're going to take it on.
Right.
We're going to work with the community, and we're going to come with something. So that's kind of the way, I think, to do it. Not to do it through any petitioned articles, but see if you can't work within the system to get all these committees and boards on board and let them help you. If it's a good amendment, move it forward.
Well, our founding fathers intended in the First Amendment to the Constitution to have the petition be a vessel for filing grievance with your community or your government. So step one is to find out if you have a grievance. If we're willing to work with you, then you probably don't. And that's the whole idea of the petition, is that to file grievance with your government for something you think they should be doing.
Madam Chair, thank you. I have one last thing, I
Yes,
promise.
please, Mr. Rubenstein.
Page 3, number 8. I just would like to point out that I want to point out my ignorance about the depth of the PFAS issue in our town. And it wasn't until I watched, I think it was the March 18th Select Board meeting, which was 2 Select Board meetings ago, that I was pretty blown away, because I knew that it was bad and I knew that it was a concern, but I encourage anyone who doesn't really understand the issue or wants to learn more about it to watch that 45 minutes or so and the presentations by the PFAS Community Working Group and the back and forth with our select board. And to that end, I just feel like, I know it's a nitpick, but instead of continue working with, I think it should say support. I think it should be, because our select board was pretty fired up, as they should be, and it just felt like that needed a little more oomph. Again, notwithstanding whoever may read this and how they may interpret it, but it feels like that's consistent with what the select board has already said, and I would imagine none of us would have an objection. Thank you.
And then they want to put the fire training facilities in Yarmouth.
Well, I'm not, Jim, you're connecting all kinds of dots that I am just focusing on number 8, where instead of continue working with, I would strike that and just use the word support.
Can't we say continue working with and support?
I was just trying to, again.
Word support is
I think the
important.
word, and it does
Yes.
say support later, but I just wanted to flip it and just start with a, hey, we're behind you. And as opposed to continue working with is kind of mushy. And again, I know, Madam Chair, we'll do this, we'll fix it in post, as they say. We'll do it when the Word document comes around, but again, I would encourage anybody who's heard about PFAS and doesn't know what it is, to watch that 45 minutes of the March 18th, 2025
It's a
Planning
big
Board
deal.
meeting. Wow, Susan, just
It's a
wow.
big deal. Oh, yeah.
I have a much bigger appreciation for what is going on, and also for our friends in Barnstable. You know, it's certainly a big important issue as well there.
Hyannis Park had always taken that on as an issue because they're big airport issues. They're big airport
played
people.
with that
And we
stuff.
sort of were interested, but not really interested.
Around asbestos.
But then once you get a presentation, you become very interested. It's extremely important.
And that gentleman who's been tracking this for 25 years, who I apologize, I've forgotten his name, who's, you know, certainly on the side of
Right.
wanting to get this right. And then, of course, no surprise, the amount of, let's just say, inertia from our friends at the state of Massachusetts,
Yeah.
which I can tell you from the Water Resources Advisory Committee, is not, we're not alone in that fact.
Yeah.
It's pretty stunning.
It is. When we were engaged with fighting the windmills in Lewis Bay, that PFAS came up. That's the first time I ever heard about it, because one of the stations, I think, that the windmill people wanted to put was up, something up in there. And Hyannis Park said, oh, my God, you know, you've got the PFAS up there. And then, once you learn about it, it's
Yeah.
very dangerous. Yeah, it's a.
Well, thank you, Madam
serious
Chair. I
issue.
just wanted to advocate for that one small thing, and I promise all my other stuff, as you mentioned earlier, we will fix it in post, and we'll use the suggestion tool on Google, on Microsoft Word.
What was the date of the select
March
board?
18th, 2025. So it was
Just a couple of weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. It was really powerful.
Worth watching.
Very, very.
It is, when you understand the depth of it, my daughter worked for the CEDC, and when you understand the depths of PFAS and what it can do to people,
Yeah.
and the issues here in Cape Cod, she actually worked right here in Barnstable County, and it's pretty frightening. It really
You
is.
watch, it makes you want to bring back the use of plastic water bottles.
And, you know, but it also connects to the, but it does connect to the airport issue, which is also a town of Yarmouth issue, and all the things that
Yes.
Christine was talking about at that meeting. So it is not as simple as, and of course, as Jim just brought up, the Fire Training Academy. Like, there's a bunch of stuff tied up in this issue, and it's quite interesting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair, just one
Yes.
last thing. Just to confirm, Kathy, I texted a friend that had better information than I did. It is 1/1/26 that the petition plastic article was pushed off to.
Thank you.
So, Madam Chair, if I understand, our instructions, our homework is to take this home, beat it up, and send everything back to Kathy with a due date of?
No, I think she's sending us an
I'll send
electronic
you a Word
version, Jim.
document. If you could track changes.
Right.
That would be
How
wonderful.
you want it back
And
to
please
is-
put your name at the
Suggestions,
top
yeah.
so that I know who,
To turn on
obviously I'll know, but
That's
it's helpful.
Go by multiple names.
And a timetable, Kathy, that you would like this by?
What's reasonable, guys?
Nothing next week, I'm in Aruba.
Next meeting?
Well, hold on. This is negotiation 101. We never make the first offer. So we will wait and hear what you and Jeff have to say. I'm kidding, Kathy. Whatever you'd like.
But 2 weeks is, yeah. 2
Next
weeks.
meeting.
Next meeting,
Meeting.
yep. But if you get it
What's
to me at
your
the
offer
next
with-
meeting,
I don't know.
I'm not going to have a chance to coalesce.
Defer to the chair.
You may say something that directly, you know, I don't know what you want to do. I'm not going to be able to make
I-
any, coalescing any of the comments or make
All right,
any
so-
changes if it's in 2 weeks.
Sooner is better, but 2 weeks would be max.
What's your deadline and what's your schedule?
Right. How about Jeff? We haven't heard from Jeff. Maybe Jeff should tell us.
He's passed out.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
He just raised his hand. Hey, Will, Jeff raised his,
Clerk, Jeff has got his hand raised.
Why can't first if the nice gentleman in the back could
Liam,
click
can
the
you
OK
let
button,
Jeff
we could
speak?
actually see Jeff's face, if you wouldn't mind, for the nice gentleman in the back of in the operations center.
Liam,
If he could click the.
I am here.
There he is.
I didn't pass out or anything. I've been listening.
He's awake, Susan.
Kathy, I defer to Kathy. I think just on the timeline, I think if you could get comments back to Kathy sooner rather than later, I think that works the best. Like within 2 weeks, Kathy's been doing a tremendous job kind of helping set the stage for us to come back to you guys. We are hoping to come back to you in May. So whether it's the first meeting in May or the second meeting in May, with that sort of second pass at the existing conditions. And what Kathy put together in your discussion tonight is super helpful for how we craft that. So I would push for sooner rather than later, because I think this is not the last time you'll see it. I think we're hoping to take all the input and then put it back in front of you again in May. So, I think it's that iterative process.
Madam Chair, can I ask Jeff a quick question about that?
Yes, you
You
may.
mentioned the matrix, and we won't talk about red pill or blue pill, and that's, that might have gone over some people's heads, but I don't care. When does the matrix of it all start to come in? Because again, some of these, I think we're all worried, we're concerned about some of the process, but the process, all of it hasn't been revealed yet, again, with the pills.
Yeah.
But you understand why I'm asking. Can you update us on that, please, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I think the matrix will come a little bit closer to the end, just because it is the place where every potential action gets put into a section. Our general timeline right now was, and we spoke with Kathy about this, is to try to get the existing conditions section back to you, preferably in early May. And then we owe you all sort of some draft chapters, the housing chapter, and the capital facilities chapter. And we had targeted trying to get that to you by the end of May, so that you have sort of a more complete draft, the whole draft. And then embedded with that is the targeted action plan. And I think the targeted action plan really is actually going to be important to set the stage for the matrix. So it's kind of a existing conditions, the targeted action plan, and then the matrix.
So, yes, the movie was right, Madam Chair, is basically what he's saying. Okay, I got it.
One of the other things
the
that you'll
matrix.
see in here is I also took a shot at the goal. So each one has a goal now. I tried to take a look at, what was in the original vision plan and see if we could make that goal. I also looked at the Cape Cod Commission's RPP goals. They're very generic, but I tried to do that. So when you're looking through it, also take a look at the goal as well as the action items. And then, again, if you have any other key issues that you think need to be identified, again, I totally agree, we need to do some wordsmithing on them to make sure that they're in the right format. But yeah, when you're looking at it, look at that as well.
Yeah, and if I could add to that too, because I think I waited too long to talk, because I have a little quick list of things to just offer. The document that Kathy gave you guys is really great, and it's a perfect outline. Just I think as a reminder, the format that we're going to be working into is similar to Sandwich, and so the document will have an executive summary. And then it'll kind of be the middle, the most robust section is this existing conditions. And we gave you like too much the first time, but the second pass is going to be some really key statistics under each of these topics. And then it's going to be the key issues, which that document that you have in front of you is starting to identify the key issues. And then it'll kind of cap off with recent actions by the town, and or kind of like references to the most important plans that talk about everything in more detail. We'll have a housing chapter, capital facilities, and then there's this kind of shift in the document template. There's a shift to the targeted action plan, and what we're starting to look at is what Kathy has there for the goal and the actions. They all kind of end up in that targeted action plan section. And we did start to kind of lay it out in terms of like how it might appear in a format. And we think that the way it's structured right now is the goal, it would be this overarching goal for the general topic, say natural systems or open space. And then it'll have those action items will be encapsulated in that targeted action plan. And so I did take a shot at kind of graphically comparing where we want to go with Yarmouth's and comparing it to a couple other LCPs that we know got certified by the commission. And so I think we're on the right path to do this, so it'll be kind of much easier to read for people who get this document and want to thumb through it. So I think that'll start to really come back to you guys in May, so you can start to help see the content and then how it might lay out. If I could just say, I think two more things was, as you're going through it over the next week or two, I think things that are missing is going to be super helpful. I think this is the one of the most important times that if we can capture things that you think are missing and make sure they're in there, that would help us. I think wordsmithing and making sure everything's in the proper verb tense and things like that, and making sure they're objective statements. I think we're going to get through that pretty soon, and that'll be an action item. We can take your input and then make sure that we're doing that. The only other thing I had on my notes was about performance measures. I think Peter asked it. I think it's a great question, and I think that's going to take a little more thought.
Yeah.
And I think Kathy said something really pertinent, which is there's going to be a fine line where we can't within the scope of the project, and we probably don't want to be too specific in terms of the town should allow 26 ADUs. Like, I think some of those types of things are going to be difficult to measure, but I think we have to sharpen our pencils on how we're going to handle that with you guys too. So that'll be something forthcoming. And then I think really the last thing, it was something about the select board. It was the discussion with the select board, and we did look at their goals for FY24, I think it was, and FY25, and they seem to be really in line with the majority of these high level items that are being identified in the LCP. So I think that you should be applauding yourself as a community that the select board goals are really in line with the key themes that we're seeing. And I think the effort that we'll go through over the next couple months, we're looking to kind of get a complete draft wrapped up and done by the end of June. No, actually, sorry, I think it was August on the timeline. So we have the summer to refine all this with you all. But I think one of the things that we heard from the Cape Cod Commission, which I don't think we've rectified yet, is making some of the actions targeted, which I think implied some level of prioritization. And I think that's what they were trying to talk to us about, is the targeted action plan is not the list of every single action. It's kind of these targeted actions that will allow a bunch of other activities to fall under them. So Kathy and I haven't spoke at length about that, but I think like the PFAS issue is one of those really important targeted action plan items that's super critical. And I think, as Will said, it touches all these other components. And I think the wastewater project over the next 30 years is one of those that leads the way for a lot of these other projects to fall under them. And so we have to work together as to how to kind of illustrate that for people. So sorry that I waited too long to talk, so I didn't just throw a bunch of stuff out there, but those are my quick comments.
Thank you, Jeff.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Certainly.
One of the things is when we have a draft, then we need more public input on the draft. So I guess I wanted to talk to Jeff a little bit. We haven't talked about it, but we had talked maybe briefly about a survey, or is this a case where we're going to be doing it through just a general, here's the draft, it's open for, a 45-day public comment, provide comments to me. I mean, how are we going to be getting the public input on the action items?
I have a suggestion, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Well,
Mr. Rubenstein.
all of us have subcommittee assignments, various, ways and means. Some of them meet more than others, but at least we could take it upon ourselves to advocate, for that kind of input in our own other assignments. I know that's a supplemental thing. That's not a primary.
Right. I think the way it was, the kind of way I have been
Understood
thinking
what you
about it was that I was hoping to get comments from town staff before I presented it to you,
see.
and then get your input back, and then present it and then send it out to the committees. Because the committees did a great job. They really helped us out a lot. Staff really helped us out a lot. People did answer a lot of questions for us, which I appreciate, just to make sure that there's nothing like fully sideways on what they want to do. And then so that gets incorporated into the draft that then gets presented to the public.
I made that suggestion in addition to a survey, which is not a bad thing, and certainly people do enjoy, and we've had some nice public engagement throughout this process, in person, on Zoom, and otherwise. But I just also thought, thank you for explaining, Kathy. I understand the issue better now than me just saying, well, we should tell our committees. I got it.
But I guess I'm curious on what Jeff, and again, maybe Jeff and I should just need to talk about this a little bit more. But at some point, we need to talk about the next level of public engagement on, because the public, other than, if they happen to see the packet, doesn't really know where we're going. So we need to make sure that we're vetting these things with them.
So
Yeah,
if,
Kathy, if the committee, if the board is willing to give us a little bit of leeway to get through, like, we want to present some more complete information to you in May, and I think that would be a good time for us to talk about what do we do next for community engagement, because I guess we would, in theory, we would have between May and about August, to figure out I think a survey is important. I think that's one of the best ways for us to re-engage, because I think we might be past the point of bringing people into a large meeting room and workshop stuff. I think we're at the point of making sure that like the questions we're asking you guys, did we miss anything? What are the issues that you think are most important? But we should probably strategize about that and talk about a game plan for kind of a final outreach, either prior to the planning board holding the public hearing, and or prior to town meeting. I think that's going to be kind of the emphasis, is that people are aware of this before it gets to town meeting, and we have not fleshed out the best way to do that just yet.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Saban?
I know we all hate meetings, but maybe, I think when we had our original focus groups, there were probably 50 people, the number online and the number on people, and we probably have a list of some of those people. Maybe it'd be possible to bring some of them back in a couple-hour focus group of, hand select a handful of those people and bring them back, and, they are aware of what we're doing from the get-go, so bring them back as a quick focus group rather than trying to put together a Survey Monkey or something like that. That might be a just as effective way. I don't know, just a thought.
It's a tricky one because there's so much information. And how do you present that to people in a coherent, comprehensive way? That's why I'm always impressed by the presentations the commission does, because they usually have very detailed, wide-scoping things, so.
A lot of data to go through.
Yeah.
It is. It is. And, I don't know.
I mean, Madam Chair, can I just
Yes.
comment on it?
Yes, Mr. Smith.
And Kathy, I guess my comment, just sitting there thinking about it, I think a survey is a great idea, but as we talked about, what do you send in the survey? Just the action items, and there's enough meat there. I mean, this in the end is going to end up being a living document that we're asking, whether it be the select board or town staff or whoever, to use as a guide. I'd love to get some public engagement, just as Jim said, with what's in this document, and have we gone down the right road, or have we steered off into the farm, so.
And actually, the times we have had public engagement, they've been very successful.
Yep.
The initial one and then the one we just had a while ago. They've been well-attended and very successful.
Pleasantly surprised.
But we also have to be respectful of where Jeff's coming from, having done this in many, many communities, and where we are in the timeline, and that we may have to modify our expectations about getting physically people in a room anymore. But I don't disagree that it's always been a positive experience, but, but we're at the 3/4 pole as we head towards, the most important horse races of the year.
I think if we can get the action items slimmed down, maybe the survey is a little bit more generic, that doesn't go into this level of detail, and it's, 1 to 5. How important is it to you? And if we're getting five, and that's kind of what we did in the open space.
Yes.
In rec plan, we got 5, everyone was like, is this all important? Okay, so we know that we're on the right track because everyone thinks this is relatively important.
And there was room for comments, and people
Yep,
were certainly
right.
willing to share their comments, especially about, wait for it, pickleball. Okay, sorry. Man, did we hear some pickleball comments. Anyway.
Yeah, Jeff and I can brainstorm a little bit more about that. We also don't want to have, the open space and rec plan survey was way too long,
Oh, yeah.
way too long. So I think we'd have to
Give
really.
it a gift card at the end.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm willing to have a conversation with Kathy and bring it back to the planning board. I think a survey to help validate a lot of the key, especially the key actions that the town will be taking over the next 10 years. I think I think a survey is a good platform for that, and maybe a combination of what Jim said, maybe a focus group, if not making sure that those people who have been engaged get to take that survey, just to, I think a lot of what we would want to do now is validate the key ideas. And a survey, like Kathy said, ranking certain things is a relatively easy process for people, and it's not as laborious as taking, the open space plan surveys are often really long. And I think at the tail end, we probably would want to make it so that we're just continuing to raise awareness for people. So if they're clicking on buttons that say, continue to pursue PFAS treatment, continue the wastewater treatment project, focus on Route 28 for development, protect the beaches and waterways. I think that validation would be really critical for us to have to kind of cap off the plan. So Kathy and I will put our heads together and come up with a plan for kind of the last couple months of the project.
Sounds great.
Thank you, Jeff. Anything more on the plan? Okay, next on our agenda is Mattakees Utilization Committee update.
Yes. Well, we'd be happy to know that the MUC consultant has been selected, and it's BSC Group. So Jeff and Heather are also going to be helping the town with taking all those different ideas, those ideas that all these different land use teams come up with, and then coalescing that and trying to come up with the different, 3 different concept plans for further review. So we did, and I'm going to let Peter talk about the CEDC meeting, but the next one, the next meeting for the recreation is on April 9th at 6 p.m., and then open space is April 15th at 5 p.m. CEDC also has another meeting later, the economic group on April 28th. So all of this is on the schedule that's on the town website under the Mattakees Utilization Project, so I'd encourage everybody to take a look at that. Bill Scott's also added a bunch more information on there. Each group has all their brainstorming, has been summarized and is included on there, as well as some additional background reports. So as new information comes around, it gets put on that webpage, so I would encourage people to take a look at that. And the next MUC meeting is April 14th, where BSC Group is going to be kind of introducing themselves and going over the schedule of their work.
Mixed use,
Before, Madam Chair, can I ask Jeff a quick question?
sports
How
complex.
big is the staff of BSC?
You said how big is the staff?
Just out of curiosity, is it,
Well, BSC is broken up into different groups or divisions. So the planning division is Heather is the director, and myself, and there's another person in the office named Aksa, and she and I are both senior planners. And then we have Adam, who I think most of you actually met Adam, is the staff planner. And then kind of attached sort of to the side is the vice president of the company is Jeff Fasser. So he's a landscape architect and a certified planner. So he's kind of overseeing the planning division. And then from there we have, ecologists and engineers and transportation folk who are all in different departments, and they all have separate staff groups and things like that.
4.5 people. That's what I heard him say.
4.5
He
people?
said someone
terms
was
of the planning
attached.
division, yeah.
He said someone, but
Some were attached.
4 full, 1 part. No, but I mean, that's the scope.
Yeah, we are actually having a staff meeting with BSC Group tomorrow to kind of talk about the work that they're doing for us, and then the extra work we gave them, and then the MUC. So they're going to be very, very busy, but one of the things that's very valuable is they now know Yarmouth. They know all the players in town hall. They have a really good understanding of our community that to start with a new consultant, they wouldn't have. And it would be kind of an educational process there, so.
And there was a tree, a structure of how BSC works with the other components. So we also have GIS people. And so there was a proposal submitted that has kind of that framework for how BSC would handle that. And then Kathy, this might be too much, but we did have a sub-consultant as an architect from Yarmouth on board with that project to help with some of the estimates of probable costs and floor plans and some of the potential rendering. So we had to, put together a team for that.
I agree, it is good to have a company that has familiarity with the town. I know there's other organizations, private companies that have done quite a lot of work in the engineering areas, and others that they have a working knowledge with the town, so it's beneficial to do that, so, good. Weston and Sampson and Weston, or Weston?
Weston and Sampson did the open space and rec plan.
Right, they've done a lot of, that's one of the ones that comes to mind, who's had a lot of work in town, that they know us.
Yeah, they're also working on the recreational field study and for the capital plan. Yep, you're right. So I didn't know whether Peter wanted to talk a little bit about
Yeah.
CEDC?
So, 2 meetings down, 1 to go, essentially. People look at, many of you have already been on CDC, so you sort of know, what we're working with. And I think I think the CDC is looked at as the Economic Development Group. And we all know that, our last meeting, not muck meeting, was 2 hours, 2 hours, 30 minutes, and 1 hour and 50 minutes was spent on, sand castles and puppet shows and different things, So we're limited, in terms of what we can churn out for economic development. And I think this is outside of the muck, obviously, part of what, what's going on now, but I think we're getting there. But our involvement in the muck committee, I think we're going through the exercise as many other committees are. And it's a matter of, what can we do to create an economic development opportunity at Mattakese? And I think where we're steering sort of our attention to is trying to find out how we can get back to Route 28. How can we take maybe some of the town's needs, whether it's a fire station, expanding the school, using Mattakese for those sort of things, so that we can maybe get back to focusing on 28. Because what truly can we get economic development out of Mattakese? It's all going to be, the ripple effect of what. So, that being said, our ideas are standalone indoor-outdoor sports complex, sports complex with event space, and some mixed-use development, including sports, events, retail, housing of some type. And I think that's where we're at. We left the meeting, and those were the ideas that I think we sort of funneled into 3. And whether or not those are the last 3, or the 3, it's some variation of those 3 things that I think we're looking at. To give you an idea of where the other, the chamber side was, before the meeting, their ideas were put together in a packet. All of our ideas came together in one packet. But, some of their ideas were, included such examples as Tanglewood, someplace like Tanglewood.
Tanglewood, did you say? Tanglewood?
Yeah.
Okay.
Music venue.
We could use an event space like the Mass Mutual Center, Boston Convention Center. Some pretty, yes, Jim, ambitious.
So did those come from the chamber, or were those from the consultant? Trying to come up with examples based on the idea?
The consultant listened to what the chamber was saying and came back with those ideas. Now,
The consultant came back with those ideas.
well, no, the consultant, I don't know how they got to paper, but that was the consultant's understanding of what the chamber group was saying. Now, at the same time, sports complexes, the sports complex like Starwood in Hanover, Longplex Family Sports Center, Tiverton, Rhode Island, Fort Kicks, Taunton, Fort Kicks Golf and Sports Center, Norfolk, Mass. So some other smaller venues that would include indoor courts, outdoor courts, maybe a pool, something for seniors, gymnasium for seniors. Pickleball actually didn't come up. I actually didn't, unless they didn't hear it, pickleball didn't come up.
We got it covered.
If there's courts, there's going to be pickleball.
After Sandy.
Gymnasium. you know, some of our ideas were, part of our ideas too was, you know, a walkable mixed-use project that included a combination of office space, maybe having the hospital come on board, taking some of the office needs of the hospital away from the hospital, and maybe bringing them towards Mattakese. Okay. As Mr. Scott said, you know, a lot of that is nonprofit, and that's not going to really enhance our tax base. So maybe not office, you know. I don't even know how much the hospital has really reached out to us and ever. You're shaking your head, no, that's kind of what I heard
Not to
too.
my knowledge.
Never, right.
I mean, they had all of that land on Addicts Lane
There's a
that
ton
they
of land.
purposely didn't do anything
They
with.
sold it off.
They've actually used, right.
Right, and they're using it for something else now because, you know, there's a whole bunch of regulations that go into hospitals and sites for
There's
hospitals.
federal funding that comes into play with the hub, is at the central hub, and I don't know the numbers. I've been told by my boss about why they built and where they built it. It's all about federal subsidies and how much money they can get out of the feds to build complexes within a certain radius of.
There'll be none anymore.
Well, yeah, I'm not making that comment, Susan.
It's zero.
Yeah, I'm not going there. I'm talking about in the past.
The history
So,
of that.
10 years ago,
Yeah.
that was the
To
impetus.
build in what, were you saying?
so that was why the stuff on Addicts Lane got built, because as the crow flies, it was a certain distance from the hospital, and also had to do with, you know, housing density within the region. There's a whole formula, a federal formula where you get reimbursed by the feds. Well, as Susan said, that's probably dried up, so.
But it is educational that there hasn't been a further expansion of the medical use of that property. In fact, it's been, my understanding, right, Ken? They've actually, the hospital has
Oh,
sold
no, it's done.
I just remember when
to make it more,
they did the
Not that.
DRI for the tower that they're building now,
Right.
people were pushing them towards the Addicts Lane, and there was a very legitimate reason why they couldn't go there, or they needed to get all types of, different types of approvals for that site to be a,
medical.
There was two reasons why they didn't go over there with what they built on the hospital grounds. One being permitting with the town, and two being infrastructure. The infrastructure to support, you know, electrical, sewerage, all that stuff was already pre-existing.
Which brings us back to Mattakese, because it's those issues are going to be driving a lot of what actually happens on that site.
That's right.
And last time I checked, there was no sewers.
Well, okay, so Bill Scott did say, right.
Sorry.
He applied for grants to bring the sewer down Buckeye. Is that right, Kath?
yeah, he's applying for, I think, he put his letter, kind of our interest into the One Stop. The applications, I don't believe, are due until June, but was for like a 15% design of a sewer system coming down that particular way. What might happen if we could maybe extend that also up to the exit 7 or 72 area? Because right now there's no retail there, but who knows? If you have a sewer line coming down, that might make some sense of maybe doing some rezoning in that particular area.
And you have the rail trail coming down there,
You got the rail trail coming.
allegedly, in the near future.
Already clearing the trees
I
for
know,
it.
but, you know, until it happens, it isn't
It's
happening.
Already taking down the
started
trees on Willow
construction.
Street.
All right, so, you know, so some combination of a sports complex, I think, is where we're at, you know, some combination of a mixed-use development, sports events, retail, housing, creating recreation opportunities for residents. You know, they did have good representation on their side, certainly from, you know, the hotel, the restaurant, other stakeholders, you know, that you know, came forward with some great ideas. So I think it was, you know, it's productive, but at the same time, you know, I'm an appraiser, right? Your highest and best use, what can we do there? We don't know. And so this is it's an exercise, you know. And but I think some good things came out of it, and we'll see what the final three are. But there'll be some variation of those, whatever I just said, those three. You know, they're all very similar. So, but there are, you know, one of the things that came up at the first meeting, you know, that I had mentioned, and it was already in motion, was, you know, we need a new we need a new fire station over in Bass River. So, you know, and everybody knows, I mean, it's old, I'm assuming it's old, right? So I'm assuming we do. And
Older than you.
We're gonna have all this housing on Route 28, and it's gonna probably be, there's gonna be more people and more housing units, so it only makes sense. So, and we need a new school. And, you know, it doesn't make sense to, we need a new library, right? So does it make sense to sort of consolidate some of these things and give us back some of the Route 28 acreage land, whether it's this building, whether it's some part of the, I don't know, but there, you know, the Chamber building, you know, at the four corners, at the intersection there.
Doesn't make much sense to build a fire station over there. You already got Station 3 right around the corner.
Yeah, well, no, but maybe the fire station goes here,
Yeah.
in this land. You know,
Put
it's
the fire station across the street and have a great big open field.
So many dominoes. So
I don't know,
many
so,
dominoes.
but.
It's only money,
but,
right?
So, that's where we're at.
I'm all set.
Okay. I do have an update on housing because we met on March 17th. And they came up with 3 scenarios, obviously all housing. One would be just mixed residential, and they had a moderate and an elevated proposal of using 6 acres for approximately 62 units, or using 12 acres for 135 units. The next one was mixed residential and specialized housing. This was a discussion which I think, in my opinion, is going to go nowhere, about collaborating with the Yarmouth Housing Authority. It's just not going to happen. They're a state agency, and I can't imagine that having some kind of a cooperative agreement with them is in the short term doable. But on the committee is a member of the Yarmouth Housing Authority, so on CHC. You know, and there's this program called Soldier On, which is primarily for vets that are, it's kind of congregate housing, single room kind of thing. And again, that was kind of a specialized use that that Yarmouth Housing Authority member had brought forward. Just the land and the relationship and the legality of it, very, very difficult to, I think, to move forward. Anyway, the third scenario was mixed-use residential and community uses, including gyms, game rooms, daycare center, wellness center, and small shops maybe with housing above. So those were the 3 that we came up with. In our next meeting is at the end of April, I think. I forget when we're meeting, Kathy.
I
didn't
thought you were done.
Just saved you a meeting, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I thought that was your third one, was on the March 17th meeting. And I think,
It's been, you're funneled.
I think you're funneled
You don't have to
down.
funnel anymore.
I believe that Mary had run it by the Affordable Housing Trust, and I think she might be running it by the Community Housing Committee. But I think they do have the elevated and the more moderate option, related more towards the first one that you were talking about with the 6 acres, 62 units, and 12 acres. But I think they went down to like 124 units, kept it to like double. Right now, the housing production plan requires like 62 units to be created annually. So they just said either, 1 year's worth on this site, or maybe maximum would be the higher one would be the 2 units. And I think still leaving some ability open there for like some collaboration in those numbers with veterans. I think there was some affordable housing that was or home ownership, like 6 to 12 units of that. And then they were also talking, I think, about 6 to 12 units of some type of housing that might be related to municipal employees. I'm sorry, I didn't print it out. I wish I had.
Yeah, oh,
Madam Chair,
Maybe Deirdre knows from
Yeah.
Community Housing Committee.
it was a difficult meeting. First of all, it was delayed for almost 40 minutes because of technical, and I was zooming in. So, I may have missed the end just because of the technical difficulties. It was really it wasn't a great meeting, but I didn't realize that we had actually come to some decisions.
Towards the end, they did come to some decisions.
There was a vote of some kind?
Well, it was sort of a summary by the consultant, the Barrett Consulting people, a summary of what they felt the consensus had been, and they would be writing it up. And that, as Kathy said, 124 units as the max, the elevated.
Yep, okay.
And they're,
All affordable, 124 affordable?
No.
they're talking about,
Only 125 units.
I think it was 25 to 50% of it would be affordable.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that range. So there would be some market rate units.
a lot of mixed discussion about the affordable versus market rate and the size of the units and all that. And they did come to some conclusions. I didn't get it all written down, but
I have what the proposal was. It was 45 one-bedroom and studio, 42 bedrooms, and 15 three-bedrooms. And of them, 25% of all of them would be affordable, I think.
I think the way they did the range at the end was to follow the, I think it was the LIP standard, the local program. I think it was 25 to 50%.
25 to
It went to
50,
the
okay.
Affordable Housing Trust, and I think they made some minor edits to it, and I think it's going to the Community Housing Committee. You haven't seen it.
No, I haven't seen anything yet.
So you should see something coming back. They had met together, the Affordable Housing Trust and Community Housing Committee, and then they took all that great information, Barrett summarized it, they sent it to the Affordable Housing Trust, they had a few minor edits, and now it's going to go to the Community Housing
Oh,
Committee
okay.
to get your final approval on it before it gets submitted to MUC, was my understanding.
Okay.
Madam
You know
Chair,
more than I do. And Deidre, that's good.
And there was a lot of discussion about the fact that housing does require the sewer a lot more than some of the other uses, and that there also will be a lot of need for parking and
And we did talk about parking.
maybe.
Infrastructure in general.
Yeah, and they talked about putting the housing in the back corner, sort of, and having room for all the other uses,
They did talk about locations where
Yep.
they thought it would.
that sort of thing.
And the one question I didn't get to raise there, and I hate to take everybody's time, but, you know, there is if I understand Mr. Rack, there is a capacity that the wastewater treatment plant will have, even if we get all of these agreements.
Eventually.
And and there is some, if I remember this discussion between you and Kathy at one point, we've built in some growth that doesn't exist now, some housing that doesn't exist. I'm wondering if this kind of a large project is one that would accommodate that the sewage treatment plant could, even if there were a sewer, would it have the capacity to accommodate this many units?
Yeah, I think when we were looking at the,
In that growth
Yep.
addition?
yeah, I think maybe right now, it's like 750,000 gallons per day of potential future growth. So I think there's a good chunk. I think the key is, can you get rid of the effluent?
Yep. Yeah.
But the comprehensive wastewater plan was like the 3.54 million gallons per day, and that included about 750,000 gallons
Yeah, of growth.
of growth.
Yeah.
It will require some cooperation from our friends at the State Department of Environmental Protection in order for us to even have phase one to be
Right,
handled, much
right.
less anything beautiful and wonderful that we tried to do on the
The
Mattokees
vast
property.
majority of that growth was obviously happening in phase one.
Right.
So a big chunk of that the gallonage was coming from phase one.
Phase one. Oh, okay, okay.
Madam Chair, could I ask a quick question? How many more units do we need to create to get to 10%?
Oh, I don't know offhand.
600,
600?
No, I don't think it's that many, Cap.
I do.
I thought Mary had made a dent
The
on that.
only reason I ask that is because here I look at, we have, it's the life mission of certain individuals and committees to get to 10%.
Right.
You got a 70-acre parcel of land, and you're talking about so many units affordable and so many units not affordable. Make them all affordable and get to your damn 10%. I don't understand why you wouldn't do that.
Can I say, like, the
Here-
anomaly of the subsidized housing inventory is if you have a rental apartment building, and maybe only 25% of them are affordable, you get to count all of them on your subsidized housing inventory for rental apartments. So even though we say we have 600, it may not be truly 600 subsidized. It's just one of those anomalies that, of how they calculate it.
I mean, I'm all in favor. My
think the
personal
police
preference is the sports complex idea, but gee, if we're trying to eliminate the issue of affordable housing and you've got 70-plus acres to play with, you can take a serious whack out of that number.
And
If
we've
you're,
given up a once-in-a-lifetime economic development opportunity.
not if you do it the right way. You can have, both can be right at the same time. You can build a sports complex with housing.
That's why we have a MUD committee.
That's why we have a funnel, Jim.
Exactly. That's the funnel.
God, if you're listening, we hear you, bro.
Can I just make a comment?
We're funneling.
Funnel.
You know, I'm on a committee that's never met, so you're finished and I've never met. And so
Susan,
I-
we haven't
so
met, the education one hasn't met either.
Probably
Oh,
won't.
No, and it will never because of the
Anyway,
school
I-
study.
You
but
No
that's-
federal funding.
I had, and probably will never get it. But I had an idea, so I spoke to Kathy and I said, you know, I have this idea, what should I do with it? And then I said, well, maybe I'll give it to Peter, because he's on the economic development, you know, on the economic development group, and then is working with the MUC. You know, I looked at this a little bit differently. I looked at it from the point of view is, what does the town have, and what do developers want? We have assets in terms of location. We have a lot of buildings, the town owns a lot of land along 28, which is our main corridor, our commercial corridor. Not all of it, but a good chunk of it. We own this site, we own the site across the street, we own the corner of West Yarmouth and Route 28, we have the senior center, we've got some very valuable pieces of property along 28. So my thinking was, you know, we've got that, and developers would want that because of location. They bring money and expertise, and we bring the asset to the big table. And then from that relationship, we try to get, we want to have something at Mattakese, that's the jewel in the crown, but we also would like some open space stuff, we'd like maybe some housing, I looked at all the subcommittees, could we accommodate the needs of each one of these subcommittees in a broader look at what we have in terms of assets? And so my proposal was to have the town look at what we own along 28, also the senior center, and try to talk to developers and say, look, would you be interested in partnering with us, developing these other sites? You'll have an opportunity on 28 to make money, particularly if you do I don't know, a decent hotel or restaurants, whatever it is. And we will share with you, we'll give you our asset for, let's say you have a 100-year ground lease. We always retain the property, but you're gonna have a 100-year ground lease. 25 years, you make all your profits, or 15 years, at the end of the 16th year, we start sharing in some of the profits, so that we become more of a partner. But we partner with them on the asset, they bring the expertise and the money, but don't limit it just to Mattakese. Incorporate some of the other sites that we own along 28, because that is economic development. Mattakese is the jewel in the crown, and unfortunately, it's not on 28, but it's a huge site. So with the combination of that site and the size of it, and some parcels along 28, maybe we could put a bundle together and say to developers, are you interested in this? If you want the town hall site, okay, but you've got to replace that over at Mattakese. At a minimum, that's got to go over to Mattakese, and would have, a one-stop shop, would have a, town hall, and maybe piggyback the sports, complex on that. Because you have a lot of open space, you could have meeting rooms. So it was sort of like, it's a fairly, simple idea. We've got stuff, you've got stuff. We don't have what you have. We don't have money, and we don't have a lot of expertise. And we've got location, and for developers, that's the mother's milk of development, is a great location. So I sort of sent Peter an email with sort of outlining that, and I think I sent it if I never go to the,
Bill Scott got it.
Bill Scott, if I never go to the
I think he is working on.
City Services Subcommittee, that's my idea.
Basically, your idea is Reese's peanut butter cups. Chocolate,
Yeah, it is.
Peanut butter,
It's
Reese's peanut
it's
butter
OPM, it's other
Got it.
people's money.
It's great.
It's other
No, but I'm
people's
saying
money,
it's
yeah.
I got it.
Because there are some sites along 28 that we own that are very valuable. I mean, the corner of 28 and West Yarmouth Road, opposite the cemetery,
We don't own the corner.
I thought we owned that site.
No, one lot over.
We owe the lot, one lot up.
One lot-
Oh, one lot over, okay, all right, so we.
Susan, would you be willing to concede that our libraries are also valuable properties on Route 28?
Definitely, absolutely,
Awesome.
not the West Yarmouth one, but the
Oh,
others.
of course, because that's not on Route 28.
All right, I'd like
Anyway.
to
No, no.
get back on track here.
Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to get back on track, because.
But that was, so I don't know what to do with that, but it's now on the record, so that's
a
it.
good thing, thank you. I appreciate that.
Can I add one more thing?
Yes, you may.
Okay. Whatever happens at Mattakese, you know, the B3 zoning down the street is not very accommodating to, you know, and that's something that I had mentioned early on in the first meeting. It's, you know, you want a cup of coffee, you're going to go to Hyannis, or where are you going to go if you're at Mattakese? I mean, because you know, the B3 is all pretty much office.
And it's,
Retail's not allowed by right.
Right.
Restaurant's not allowed by right, and that's everything.
and it's not an interchange.
You can't even have a little convenience store on Mid-Tech Drive.
Yeah.
So something.
Well, that would have to change. I mean, if we're gonna go
Also the
big
home of our
time-
adult entertainment district as
It
well?
is.
No, not Mid-Tech Drive.
That's up the
Not
street.
specifically, I'm talking about that general area.
Yeah, Ansel Hallett, I think is,
Thank you.
Is that the cutoff?
that's the only road. Our adult
Oh, that's right, before you get to
entertainment,
the
that's
light.
one
You're right.
road, adult,
You're right, yeah.
Ansel Hallett, Adult Entertainment District.
There's a lot of land that's wellhead protection there too, so. But there is definitely some parcels that would benefit from some zoning, especially if you can bring the sewers up there. Because it is in the zone too.
Okay, moving on. Meeting minutes. May I have a motion to accept the minutes of January 15th?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
May I have a motion to accept the minutes of March 5th, 2025?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
They were
All
very
in
well
favor?
written.
Yes, they were very well written, as always.
Thank you.
Aye.
All in favor?
Unanimous?
Unanimous.
Anything, correspondence or staff updates, Kath? I think we,
The only-
committee updates?
Oh.
Unless, Mr. Saban, do you have a committee update?
I do. Although it is not mentioned in the comprehensive plan's community systems, community character, and cultural heritage, I would like to remind the public that the Parkers River Landing Boardwalk planks are still for sale, and the Board of Selectmen just accepted over $12,000 in purchases for boardwalk planks. So maybe we'll get it added to the community character and cultural heritage section of the LCP, but in the meantime, $350 for a single, $450 for a nonprofit, and $550 for a business, and there are a bunch of them already out there. So
Jim, when do we get to launch our kayaks?
next summer, I would guess.
October.
It'd be fall before you,
This year?
yeah.
Oh, heck.
The entrance is really
it's lovely.
shaping up. The Kathy Williams lights are up.
The foundations,
They were installed this week. So now you've got the bridge, and it looks very, very nice.
it's pretty cool. The foundation is in for the bathroom facilities. The boardwalk, they're starting to put the planks along the,
Are they?
so
Yeah,
you don't
can
stick
see
your
a
head
lot
out
of
the front.
progress.
Cool. Look for some more
it's-
drone footage also.
Yeah, it's coming along. It's pretty cool.
Great, thank you.
We just
That's all I
put-
had.
We just put in a big batch of, I think it might be the last batch of engravings that are going to Robert B. Hour to have engraved and put out. Because they want to be pretty much, they want to wrap up the boardwalk in the near future. But we do have the veterans ones are going to be going down, I believe, tomorrow. So the second batch of the engravings have all been engraved. So it's exciting.
Keep them checks coming.
Anything, Kath, from staff updates or anything else you want to?
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to talk about is the hazard mitigation plan. We're having a community meeting next Wednesday, April 9th at 5:30 here in this room, and also remote access. It's on the main calendar on the town website. Kind of talking about, the benefits of purpose of an hazard mitigation plan, where we are in the process, the results of the survey that we had done, and then also start talking maybe about some action items that might get some public input on those as we move forward with that. We're hoping to have that done by the end of the year as well. A lot of those ideas for action items that we've been working on have been incorporated into the document you guys went through this evening, specifically related, a lot of them to the coastal resiliency. I'm sorry, that's,
Anything else?
I'm sure there's more things I can't.
Our next meeting is April 16th, right? And then we have town meeting at the end of the month.
29th?
Put that in, because we
April
don't have anything.
Is that the 29th?
The 29th, yeah,
It just says
good point.
Yeah, there's nothing from us.
some committee members will be there for other committees. And then what's the meeting in May, Kath?
May 7th?
May 7th?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Any other questions or concerns? Okay.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn this wonderful meeting that we've had this evening.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Saban.
You're quite welcome, Madam Chair. All right.
Recording stopped.
Keep us on our toes. So then we have a big gap. We don't meet again for